You know, in the last 10 to 15 years, there have been a ton of streetwear brands that have come about. Many of them have been very successful, making tons of money, becoming larger than life. And then there are some of those brands that were very successful that suddenly you don't see around anymore. They almost like disappeared. Why is that? What happened to them? What was the cause for them to suddenly go to almost become obscure? Now, don't get me wrong. There are also brands that have been large in streetwear and still are and very relevant. But I'm curious about what happened to the ones that disappeared. And I have an idea what happened to them. And today, this video I'm making is because I want to help you guys out there who are having your clothing lines or creating clothing lines. I want to give you a perspective on why these brands might have disappeared and suddenly just, went from being big to small. What were the pitfalls that they saw, or what were the mistakes they made, and how you can learn from this and avoid those pitfalls. So let's discuss next here on Making the Brand. What's up, everybody? Rob Norman from Planet Brooklyn Academy Clothing Company, and this is Making the Brand, the series where I give you a little insight and knowledge on how to start a clothing line, and if you already have one, how to make it better. Before we get into everything, please hit that like and subscribe button, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date with everything we drop when it drops. So, fashion goes through a cycle about every 15 years. And in this cycle, basically, a lot of brands get purged and the emergence of new brands happens. Let's take, for example, when you look at urban market back in the 1990s. It was huge. There were tons of brands in it, much like in streetwear now. There were tons of brands in the urban market. And from 1990 to about 2000 was the heyday of urban. And there were so many brands in there. Once we get into 2000, suddenly that's when the shift started to happen. And urban was starting to die out. So a lot of your bigger brands that you knew and loved started to disappear. So by 2003, 2004, brands started disappearing like Rockaware, Academics, Echo. You started to see less and less of these brands. By 2005, you started to see the emergence of streetwear. So this is where the cycle happened. Again, 15 years. The cycle starts to happen and the emergence of streetwear happens. So you start seeing your LRGs. You saw your Crooks and Castles, your 10 Deeps started to show and emerge during that time. And now we're at basically the 15-year mark again. And notice those brands that I mentioned aren't really around anymore. You don't see, Crooks and Castles as much, although they're still out there and they're still making money, but they're not as prevalent as they were when they first started. I don't even know where 10 Deep is anymore. I don't even see them around. Last time I checked their site, the site was down. And they were huge at one time. But at the same time, when we talk about brands like those who started at the beginning of the trend and now we're at the end of the trend aren't around anymore, there are certain brands that have been around during these cycles. Take, for example, Stussy. You can think about other brands like Union, Undefeated. Those brands have been around. And just to talk about the first one, Stussy has been around for at least 2.5 cycles. All right, Stussy started in 1980. Why is it that Stussy has been around through urban, streetwear, and is still going strong? And the same with Union and Undefeated. They are still going strong. But they were prevalent in the streetwear market, and they were around during the urban markets. What was so special about these brands that allowed them to stay around, and other brands, like we said, like LRG starts to disappear and you don't see 10 Deep anymore? What is it about them caused them to disappear, but these other brands were able to stay around? Well, I believe the reason why these brands stay around is because they are what I like to call trend adjacent. And what I mean by trend adjacent is that these brands never actually were in the trends. They were not in the trends of urban. They weren't in the trends of streetwear, but they were adjacent to them. They ran parallel to these trends. What happens with a lot of these brands is when a trend starts and a brand kicks it off and everybody starts to follow it. Once everybody follows it, then suddenly you see the influx of other brands similar to that. And this is where you get everybody started creating t-shirt lines, and because Urban was based on t-shirt lines back in the 90s. They were doing oversized graphics, and you had tons of companies that came out and did it, and everybody made money. But once you oversaturate the market, suddenly people don't want it no more, and people are looking for alternatives, and this is when the market dies. And the same thing we're seeing happening in streetwear. Right now, streetwear was oversaturated. When it started in like 2005, 2006, slowly people started to come into it. By the time we hit 2013, everybody had a streetwear brand. I mean, Lil Wayne had a streetwear brand, Truck Fit. Everybody had streetwear brands, and money was flowing. Now, as you look at where we're at now in the cycle of fashion, the brands like Truck Fit don't exist anymore, and we're just seeing certain brands like Kith, Supreme still around. But again, these brands are around because they never followed the trends that were actually going on. And this is my biggest thing that I tell other people when they're creating a line. Do not follow trends. Watch trends, but don't follow them. When you follow trends, what happens is you get on the bandwagon and you start doing what everybody else is doing. And you feel like you have a voice and you want to do what, if this company is making millions doing this, I have a great idea similar to it. Let me do it. And you'll make money. But the idea at the end of the day is, are you looking to be a flash in the pan, or are you trying to create something that's going to have longevity? Now, there's nothing wrong if you just want to make quick money. If you want to get into the game and you're saying, look, I know this is hot right now, this is the trend, and I got an idea that's going to work, by all means, do it. But go into this understanding that at some point, this trend is going to die. And if you oversaturate the market or your consumer with your product, at some point, they're going to get tired of it. And even more importantly, they're going to outgrow it. So you have to think about this if you're creating it. Stussy, again, using them as the main example, they were trend adjacent. What they did was they never were in the trends, but people always saw things that they liked in Stussy that was similar to other brands in the trend at the time. So at the time when Urban was big, people looked at Stussy because they saw things that, kids were into skateboarding, starting to get into skateboarding. It was more prevalent towards the end of Urban that skating was becoming bigger, but Stussy was always into skate and surf. So now Urban Market was seeing that, and what they were doing was picking up colorways that the Urban Market was using, and people would see that and say, oh, I like this Urban brand, but you know what? Stussy is doing something similar because I saw the colors. And people would buy Stussy products based on colors. They may do graphics that were not similar, but in vein of the same thing. Stussy always had their own lane. They always stuck true to their brand's DNA. So they never tried to be something they weren't. They weren't urban. They weren't streetwear. Stussy is Stussy. That's what they do. And that's why they have such loyal followers. So again, when the cycle changed and urban was dying out and streetwear was coming in, Stussy was still doing what they had been doing all these years. But now streetwear started to discover them. And as streetwear is doing things, Stussy just basically said, oh, these are the color trends that they're using. It works for us. Let's work it into our story. And they worked it into their story. And once again, streetwear, much like urban, streetwear, consumer looked at it and said, hey, they're doing something over there. I like those colors. I like that graphic. Let me put this, let me pick up a Stussy piece. And they did that. But Stussy never tried to conform to the trend. They always just adopted things from that. And that's what my knowledge I'm giving to you guys is that if you're creating a clothing line and you want to have longevity in the game and you're looking at where the trends are going, what you have to realize is that you can be adjacent to the trend. You don't have to be in the trend. Adopt what you see. There's something in the trend going on, you can adopt it and put it into your line, but try to have your own lane. Create that own lane for you. Like I said, if you look at Kith does not follow a trend that's going on currently. You don't see them doing what everybody else is doing. They do their own thing. Supreme does their own thing. Everybody has their own lane. But then when you look at the main bulk of streetwear, t-shirts and everything, everybody's doing the same thing. So this is why suddenly that balloon goes bigger and then it pops. And when it pops, you get to where we're at now, where I see streetwear becoming more street luxe. And it's making that change. And again, that street luxe change, Stussy fits right in there. They have no problem transitioning into that. But a lot of these other brands that came up with t-shirts won't make the cut because they never evolved. So they don't know how to do cut and sews. They do not know how to actually create patterns that are more, upscale and get away from the oversized graphics and start doing things a little smaller. That's where they've ran into an issue. And this is what you have to look at as creating your line. You have to look at the trends. Like I said, don't do the trends or be a part of the trend. Watch the trend. If you watch the trend, you can actually see where the cliff is. Because as you watch every other brand doing it and you see how people are shopping, if you watch how shoppers move, you can tell when a trend is about to change. Because suddenly people are starting to wear it less. You're starting to see it less on Instagram. You're starting to see less superstars wearing it. And that's when you realize it is time to pivot and change your design so that you're not caught on that hill when all the animals go off the cliff. You don't want to be a part of that. So you start to make your exit strategy before then. So start changing your look. Now, even when you look outside of, say, streetwear, there are other brands that have done the same thing, have been able to survive longer than their predecessors or even their other brands that are in their realm. Think about Ralph Lauren. Ralph Lauren has been around for years. And there have been other brands that have been around during his time. Calvin Klein, Donna Karan, all of them have been around, and now you don't hear about those brands. Some people don't even know who Donna Karan is, of this younger market of streetwear. They have no idea, but they know who Ralph Lauren is. And Ralph Lauren has been able to stay relevant all these years. And again, he doesn't pivot to what's going on in the market. He doesn't follow the trends. He watches the trends, but he has his own lane. And he does what he does in his lane, and he does it well. He keeps things up to date with his marketing and stay relevant with those things, but yet he has not changed anything, but he also diversified his line. Much like I talked about in one of my previous videos where I talked about how to create a clothing line like Dragon Ball. And if you didn't see that video, you can check the link above to watch that. And I explained to you how to diversify your brand so that you don't get caught up in when the fashion trend changes, you get lost and you're basically left ass out, basically, because what happens again is that a lot of times in this 10, 15 year span, your consumer is young. And when they follow you for 10 to 15 years, you're talking about someone who's 15 years old, and by the time the trend is over, they're 30. And basically, they're not wearing the same thing they did before. So if you haven't expanded your line to accommodate what that 30-year-old now wants, you're going to totally miss out on that. So you have to think about what it is that, your next evolution of your line is going to be. Because if you just think you're going to continue doing the same thing you've been doing for the last 10 years, 15 years, and you haven't made any changes, you will be that brand that may have blown up and suddenly disappeared. Now, again, if you want to get in this for the money, by all means, do it. If you think like, hey, it's a trend, I'm not trying to really stay into this game too long, I'm going to get in while the trend is hot, I'm going to make the money and bounce, good for you. Kudos, do that. But if you actually want to stay in the game, I recommend you watch trends, see where they're going, adopt some of that into your line, but do not become a part of the trend. Try to stay trend adjacent. And then you'll be able to make it. You'll be able to make it with a lot of lines. You may not be as big as you were before, but you will stay relevant. And that's the whole thing in the game is a lot of us creating our lines out there. We want to keep this around for as long as we want because we enjoy doing this. So if you want to stay relevant, you got to know how the cycles work. So do that and just follow that. Another thing, before I forget, it is hard when you have your own line and you get that, you catch that lightning in a bottle. You have that one product that suddenly everybody wants. You don't want to stop producing it because you're making money. The problem with that is that you have to learn when to say enough is enough. Yes, you're making money and that one item may be selling, but at some point, if you oversaturate the market with that product, your consumer's going to get tired of it. You got to know when to say no or when to say enough is enough, because you keep pumping it out. That's all you're going to be known for. And when that dies down, you have nothing and you're trying to put out the next thing and people aren't paying attention to that because they're going to be like, this is what you're known for. Case in point, if you think about Von Dutch was huge. All they put out was trucker hats and everybody ate that up and they realized that was their bread and butter and they kept putting it out. And then eventually once everybody, like anybody who eats, gets full and gets sick of it, that's what everybody did. They got tired and sick of Von Dutch. And what did they do? They tried to pivot, try to make sweatshirts, try to do other things. And people didn't want nothing. They didn't want anything that said Von Dutch on it, period. They had oversaturated the market to the point that they killed their own, their own market. So you don't want to be like that. Again, if you think about Affliction, remember Affliction? Everybody in UFC was wearing it. You had the skulls, and they were huge. How many other companies copied what they did? Everybody tried to be like Affliction. Everybody had skulls and everything on their clothing, and Affliction ruled. And then suddenly, where's Affliction now? Like, they've tried to pivot, they tried to do things differently, but they waited too long to pivot. They pivoted at the end of their cycle. And when they did that, people had already walked away from the brand. So when they tried to like, hey, let's try to do something differently, let's be more graphic and not so much with the skulls, people wasn't checking for them no more. They should have pulled the plug a long time ago on the skulls and started revamping, saying, all right, you know what, we're really big now, but let's pivot. Let's now start making something different so that when this dies out, we can now rely on this because we already got motion on this. And that's where sometimes you get too hungry and you don't think about the future. You just think about the moment and the money coming in, and you lose out. So think about that as you guys are creating your lines. As you're looking at the trends, make sure you're not in the trend. Make sure you're just watching it and create your own lane. That's all you got to do. All right, I hope this was helpful for all of you guys. And again, thank you for watching my series. Apologies for taking so long to create videos. I've been so busy with my line. Also, as many of you know, I'm a college professor. I teach at the Fashion Institute of Technology. I teach product development for fashion. I've been working on a course that has been, now launches in the spring based on this show. So I have a course that is based on this show about creating your clothing brand. Unfortunately, it's only available for matriculated students at the school, but I am working right now with the department to have that course now be available hopefully sometime by mid next year for continuing ed students. So if you're a continuing ed student and you're in New York, I'm working on that to make it so that you can take this course and you can just, everything I'm talking about now, you'll learn in the course, and hopefully not long after that, we'll make it an online course so everybody else out there who is not in New York can still take this course and have a face-to-face with me, talk with me, and I'll share with you more information. But again, I apologize for taking so long to make videos. I will try to make some more frequently, but that's it for today. Again, if you have any thoughts or any comments, please leave them in the comment section below. I appreciate all your comments, and also I appreciate your suggestions, because sometimes I'm wondering what else do you guys want to know about. So please do leave that in the comment section, and I will definitely take that into consideration for future videos. So on that note, I hope you guys have a great day, a great weekend, a great whatever. Just enjoy yourselves, and I'll catch you on the next video. Peace.